Chapter 3 The Mad Madam. Jaden gave up on returning to sleep and forced open unwilling eyelids, blinking to clear bleariness away from the offended eyes beneath. What little sleep he had gotten had been fitful, filled with unpleasant visions of being herded down a long, narrow chute. Laughter kept emanating from somewhere behind him, pursuing, but there was not room enough to turn and discover the source. The feast had been a disaster. Every time he found himself drawn into conversation, Carolel would appear, looking to bait him into an in-depth discussion. More than one guest eyed him askance when his discourse suddenly turned from casual to mundane, and he quickly found a way to excuse himself. Worse still, a rumor started that he grew tongue-tied around the princess, so it stood to reason that he must be infatuated with her. It did not help that she was very much in her element at social gatherings, flitting about from one group to the next and using her charm and beauty to ingratiate herself with all who crossed her path. It soon became a great game of musical guests to try and force them together. He thought he had even witnessed his mother smiling at the sport. His own mother. By far the low point of the evening, however, had been the song. That bloody, thought-forsaken song. His father had previously commissioned the most well-known bard in the kingdom, a shaggy-haired fellow past his prime by the name of Crysin Greer, to travel to the Split in order to compose an epic on the battles won and lost there. Greer arrived to the celebration already slurring drunk, claiming that the battles had been so overwhelming they transcended the realm of music and words. Clearly, he had not gotten around to writing anything yet. Since the entertainment was not working out as planned, even more attention was turned upon the game between he and Carolel. So much so that the drunken bard eventually joined in the fun. The man could not find inspiration to sing about the most important event in the known world, but apparently had no problem locating his muse when it came to Jaden's predicament.
The shy young prince appears so dense whenever near the lady, so raise a glass and cheer the lass, oh most persistent lady. Around the room they fly and zoom, the court become a racing way, so choose your foal and lay your gold, mine is on the lay day.
The song was not at all proper, in Jaden's opinion, but he had to admit that the melody was addicting. In fact, the blasted tune had been popping in and out of his head all night, whenever slumber eluded him. He could only hope it did not catch on outside of the castle. Carolel, of course, had taken to singing it proudly. After a few glasses of wine, she finally managed to corner him behind a tapestry with a hunting scene, coincidentally, where she kissed him soundly on the lips. The girl was relentless, and his reluctance to play her games only served to intrigue her all the more. Worse yet, he could still feel her lips on his, and her body where it had lingered next to him. As dreadful as the girl was, he was a young unmarried man with desires. There was only one logical course of action. Escape. The first tendrils of direct sunlight were just creeping over his window ledge, dazzling golden shafts illuminating areas of the polished marble floor tiles like little spotlights. A pleasant breeze accompanied through the open window, along with a small rock that skipped across the floor and came to rest beneath his four-post bed. Throwing back the covers, he leapt up and rushed to find the source of the much-anticipated projectile. Sure enough, Matthias was standing in the wide alley below with the guard, Belvin, who Jaden had convinced to deliver a note to his best friend the previous evening. Belvin was a stout fellow, only a few years their senior, with dark, shoulder-length hair, a lantern jaw, and serious eyes, who Eckenroy had enlisted to challenge him as a sparring partner. The young man was as competitive as he was, and they had quickly developed an appreciation of each other's abilities in the practice yard, an unspoken trust growing between them. A coil of rope rested on the ground near Belvin's feet, connected to a grappling hook in his right hand. Apparently, Matthias had been able to talk him into helping even further. Jaden felt a twinge of guilt when he thought of the trouble the young man could find himself in for assisting him, but it quickly passed as a booming knock assaulted the door of his bedchamber.
Princess Carolel Linnea Kamchakova, daughter of Kragmir Domus Kamchakova, king of North Kalas, to see your highness.
Jaden turned to stare at the door in shock.
So early?
As much wine as the girl had consumed, he had expected her to sleep away the larger part of the morning. Apparently, she was either becoming practiced in the art of consumption, or had ordered her wine to be watered down. Come to think of it, She had maintained her balance and the clarity of her words a little too well, considering the number of times he had witnessed a servant fill her goblet. He, on the other hand, had nursed one drink throughout the entire wretched evening, not trusting himself to sustain his carefully constructed facade of stupidity under the effects of alcohol, as ironic as he realized that to be. Losing himself in drink during volatile situations was not a comfortable feeling. Luckily, he had locked and barricaded his door before turning in, just in case the princess had ideas during the night that exceeded the boundaries of flirtation. It was frightening how close he had come to purposefully not locking or barricading it. Without further delay, he motioned for Belvin to toss up the anchor. The guard swung the three-pronged head in a circular motion.
"Jayden, are you awake?"
It was Madame Lowry. Soldiers were one thing, but if Carolel had the headmistress on her side, then escape was going to be even trickier. The woman had friends and relatives in nearly every tavern and inn in the kingdom. If she put the word out that she was looking for him, his freedom might be short-lived indeed. The anchor sailed high, causing him to dive out of its path to avoid being hit in the head. Recovering quickly, he picked up the apparatus, hooked two of the flukes securely under the sill, and nodded for Belvin to test the hold.
"What was that?"
Madame Lowry's voice had taken on a distinct edge.
"Is everything all right in there, dear?"
He heard the turn of a key and the click of the door latch, followed by the rattle of the chair he had propped beneath the inside handle. The makeshift blockade held as weight pushed against it. With the line secure, he hastily threw on one of his least conspicuous outfits, an unmarked black tunic and gray cotton hose, and crammed his heaviest coin purse and a change of clothes into a leather satchel. He looked longingly at his cage-hilt rapier, but settled on a long hunting knife instead for protection. A sword that nice would give him away as someone important, raising too many questions. People might recognize him as it was, but he had an idea how to solve that problem. The banging was more insistent now. He slammed his feet into his boots, not bothering to change out the stockings he had slept in, and hurried to the window.
"Jayden, are you all right? Open this door. We are coming in one way or another." "Force it open. It is for his own good. He might be injured."
A man sighed in reluctant acceptance of the order. There was a scraping sound as something heavy was dragged across the hall, followed by a grunt as it was hefted in the air. Swinging his feet over the ledge, Jayden lowered himself and grabbed hold of the rope. There was a loud bang, followed by another and another, as he shimmied down 3 stories to the cobblestones. As soon as his feet touched down, Belvin began to whip the rope to loosen the anchor. It would not come free.
"Leave it," Jayden ordered. "We have to go."
The sound of the chair splintering echoed after them as they ran through the alley, past well-tended fruit trees and pruned rose bushes, through a small iron gate and into the inner courtyard of the keep. They slowed as soon as they were in the open, so as not to arouse suspicion, and approached the main gate at a brisk walk. The guard on duty, a pleasant enough-looking fellow with red cheeks and a round face, stopped whistling and snapped to attention upon their arrival. Was it Jayden's imagination, or was the man working to hide a grin? He suddenly wondered how far rumors of the previous evening had traveled, and that tune the guard had been whistling. Could it have been? No, it couldn't be. Now he was being paranoid.
"Good morning, Highness,"
the man greeted him cheerily. "A pleasant morning to you, soldier," Jayden returned nonchalantly. "Be a good fellow and open the sally port. We are eager to be on our way without fanfare." Silently he prayed that his father had not given orders to keep him from passing. The man glanced up to one of the gate towers. Jayden's heart sank as he recognized Captain Harvis Oradane, one of Eckenroy's most trusted commanders and closest confidants. The fact that Oradane was performing the menial task of overseeing the gate did not bode well. It was entirely possible that he was there on Eckenroy's behalf to make sure that Carolel's promised escort did not leave the keep without the princess in tow. Oradane only nodded his approval, though. Before Jayden could properly ponder the captain's swift consent, they were through the small gate and winding their way down the wide cobblestone approach that led into the heart of the gleaming city of Eridan, stretching out in a wide arc before them. It was a cloudless morning, and his spirits soared as he gazed out over the breathtaking splendor of home. Sunlight glinted from the steeple demarcating the Temple of the Thoughts, where homage was paid to the creators on a daily basis and no one was ever denied bread and water. Spread before the temple were the fountains and wide cobblestone meeting places that made up Convergence Square, the bustling hub named for the confluence of the 2 forks of the Little Willowbar River at the nearby harbor. Beyond the temple, the harbor, and the long arched bridge of the southern wall, the mighty willow bar trailed away in the distance, surrounded by rolling hills of golden wheat. To the east and west stood the great city gates, their bridges spanning either fork of the little willow bar, the attached towers guarding the city against any enemy that might try to besiege it. Since the founding of Eridan over 1,500 years before, no invading army had successfully crossed the raging, boulder-strewn streams. Off to the southeast, the University of Internal Mending rose from the residences that surrounded the complex like a shepherd standing vigil over its still slumbering flock. Soon Matthias would be spending his every moment there, but not today. Today they were free. He smiled at his friend, whose curly blonde hair was blowing wildly in the fresh morning breeze. Matthias grinned back, and together the three young men descended into the city below, whose streets were just beginning to swell with inhabitants. With no predetermined notion of where they would spend the day, Jaden gravitated naturally toward the theater district. Eridan's West Bank main stage was the most popular venue in the kingdom, and the bizarre sights and sounds of surrounding street performers, colorful artwork for sale, and carts of unique foodstuffs had always fascinated him. It was relatively quiet, the hour being what it was, but the streets would soon be packed with patrons and artful entrepreneurs alike. Convincing Belvin to stash his guard's tabard and conceal his sword as best he could, they made straight for Hidden Appetites, a shop best known for its wide variety of masks. The theater district was the one place in the city where no one would think twice about three young men roaming the streets with their faces covered, no matter the occasion or time of year. They had to wait outside for a short while before the shopkeeper, an eccentric older woman with rings on every finger, came to unlock the door. Beads and charms were woven randomly into her long grayish-white hair, and gold glittered from about half of her teeth when she smiled. The shop was clean, if cluttered, the air heavy with incense. An affectionate orange-and-white tabby with a stubbed tail immediately darted from behind a beaded curtain to rub against Matthias's leg.
"Oh, Mr. Stubby Bucket likes you," she told him while speaking to the cat. "Him senses you are a protector of life."
Matthias smiled awkwardly. Cats made him sneeze.
"I am Madame Madgalonia. Some call me Madame Mad, but those do not live very long."
The three of them shared a nervous look.
"I jest,"
she exclaimed, laughing fiercely at her own joke, followed by a snort.
"Oh, excuse me. Can I help you find anything?" she asked as if nothing at all out of the ordinary had transpired.
We are looking for masks, to celebrate the great victory at the split."
Yes, of course," she replied. "An unusual choice, I must say. Most boys your age are more fond of fire poppers and noise-makers, but I applaud your anomalistic nature. Follow me."
She led them to an enormous glass case in the center of the main room, filled with a wide variety of masks. There were porcelain comedy and tragedy masks, feathered masks with beaks, masks that looked like full or partial skulls, even one with a duck bill. Madame Madgalonia watched their expressions closely, seeming to feed off their looks of wonder. It became apparent that they were not going to be able to choose quickly, so they asked if they could browse the shop for a while.
"Of course, darlings," she nodded fervently. "I will be in the back if you need me. Lots to do. The city is abuzz, what with the victory and the royal visitors from Garban. That princess is a little doll, if you ask me." She looked at Jaden meaningfully. "Any prince would be lucky to win her affection." With a wink meant for him alone, Madame Madgalonia disappeared behind the same beaded curtain that Mr. Stubbybucket the cat had come from. They could hear her whistling merrily as she went about her work.
"What's so funny?" Jaden asked his companions irritably as they fought to maintain straight faces.
"Nothing."
"Nothing."
There were so many interesting and downright bizarre items in the shop that they soon became sidetracked. Costumes, wigs, and prop items decorated every crevice of the oddly shaped building. One entire wing held nothing but old shoes of every conceivable variety. Matthias picked up an enormous white fang made of plaster that rested between a stack of feathers and what appeared to be fake scales, scrutinizing it.
"It's light. Must be hollow. I wonder what it is."
Jaden looked closely.
"I think that was the magical tooth from last year's adaptation of The Dragon's Tooth on the main stage. I saw it twice while you were at university," he explained. "Excellent play."
Matthias nodded without really hearing, his attention already diverted by a brightly painted suit of scale armor that had piqued his interest. It was multicolored and in the style of the eastern kingdom of Facili. I think it's made of wood. Belvin and Jaden joined him. I suppose it would be cheaper than a real one, and no one could tell the difference from a distance if it were on stage. Facilian armor can't be easy to come by this far west. A real suit like this would be priceless.
You sure it's wood? Belvin asked, reaching out to touch it. It looks so real.
The piece that his fingers brushed shifted slightly, beginning a domino effect that sent the entire thing crashing to the floor. 3 pairs of eyes stared in disbelief at the disaster the light touch had created.
Madame Madgalonia could still be heard whistling, occasionally singing to herself,
or possibly to her cat.
Do you think she heard?
Matthias asked nervously.
I don't know, responded Jaden.
Maybe we should try to put it back together.
Gathering the pieces one by one, they reassembled the armor until it looked something like it had originally.
The helmet is missing. Help me look for it.
On hands and knees, they searched among piles of odds and ends and beneath racks of old costumes for the missing helmet. Matthias finally spotted it partially concealed behind a red velvet curtain that hung nearly to the floor. When he moved the curtain aside to get to it, he noticed a black door with a brass knob that had been totally concealed.
I wonder where that goes, said Belvin.
One way to find out. No, I'm sure it was hidden for a reason.
Exactly, and there is only one way to find out what that reason is.
Matthias rolled his eyes, but did not try to stop him as he reached for the knob. It would not turn on the first try. After a good twist, it finally gave with a rusty little groan. A stairway led down into darkness beyond. The air was musty, the steps covered in dust and spider webs.
We need a light. I have one, Your Highness, said a woman's voice.
They whirled in surprise to find Madame Madgalonia standing directly behind them, holding an oil lantern. She was no longer smiling as before. Her expression turned deadly serious. Mr. Stubbybucket was nowhere in sight.
We're sorry,
they blurted out on top of each other.
We stumbled on the door by accident. We weren't sure if it was a part of your store or... That's all right. It is about time I went back. I have unfinished business down there. You may join me if you wish.
What is down there? He inquired, curiosity now mixed with just a hint of nervousness.
I will show you.
Leading with the lantern, she took them down creaky steps to a basement not nearly as cluttered as the rest of the shop. What items there were, mostly furniture and lamps, were covered with sheets. From the lantern, she lit tapers in sconces that were placed evenly around the room. As their eyes adjusted to the light, they were immediately drawn to an octagonal table near the back. A banner on the wall read, Madame Madgalonia's Crystal of Illumination. The future cannot hide. The banner portrayed an illustration of the madam herself gazing deeply into a glowing crystal shard.
You give readings?
I did.
Why did you stop?
I began to doubt my abilities. Her eyes went far away, seeing the past. My predictions turned ominous, as though a great tragedy would fall upon everyone I read. It seemed too widespread to be true, the scope of such a disaster too catastrophic. It was overwhelming. So I went deeper into the realm where secrets lie to find the truth. And then...
Yes?
I was attacked.
By whom?
She looked at him blankly.
Not whom, but what?
While Matthias hung on every word, Jaden and Belvin shared a knowing smile behind the madam's back. They were not buying any of it. The theater district was full of charlatans claiming they could speak to the dead, tell your fortune, cast a spell that would bring luck and riches for the rest of your days, or 100 other ridiculous claims. Some of them were quite good, but Madame Madgalonia was by far the best Jaden had ever seen. Matthias certainly appeared to have been suckered into her fantasy. He was sure that she would ask for money soon. She had guessed who he was, after all, and royalty meant a big payday. His purse held enough that he could easily accommodate her and still have plenty of coin, so he decided to oblige her.
How much for a reading?
Jaden, did you not hear what happened the last time?
It's all right. The smallest moon has run its cycle 7 times since the attack, and yet the kingdom has not been invaded. My predictions must have been false, as I suspected.
It is possible that the presence that assaulted me has given up and moved on. I would give anything to be able to use my gift freely again. Losing such a thing is akin to losing a limb or your eyes. Once you have seen the beyond, to be without it is to be half of who you were. Sit. I will read what part of your future that my power allows, as I have done for your father before you.
You gave my father a reading?
I did.
Not likely, he thought. Urion had never once expressed any interest in fortune-tellers or the unknown. His father was a practical man.
What sort of donation would...
I will not accept coin for this,
she told him very seriously.
I only pray I can give you better news than I gave the king. Please, sit.
Jaden did as instructed. He wondered what the woman was playing at by not accepting his money, but assumed she was probably waiting to take him for more once he was hooked. Madame Magdalonia took the seat across from him and slowly pulled a cloth from an object in the center of the table. It was the rough-hewn crystal shard from the banner. "Isn't it supposed to be a ball?" he joked. The madam did not laugh, only gazed into the shard, breathing deep. Nothing happened for a time, and he began to grow restless, casting sidelong glances at his companions to see if they were becoming as tired of the madam's dramatics as he was. Belvin afforded him a sympathetic smile, but Matthias was still fixated on what the fortune-teller was doing, which was nothing that he could see. He was trying to think of a polite way they could excuse themselves, when her frame suddenly stiffened, her back arched severely, and her arms shot out in front of her. Her hair whipped wildly as though caught in a stiff wind. But there was not so much as a breeze in the dimly lit basement. Jaden scrambled from his chair in shock, knocking it over in the process. Either she was very, very good, or what they were witnessing was no parlor trick. The reaction was too violent for anyone to put themselves through it willingly. Seeing that Belvin had drawn his sword, he fumbled for his hunting knife. He was not sure what good a weapon would do in the present situation, but its presence made him feel better all the same. The unexpected fit passed as abruptly as it had come on, and the madam's head slumped limply onto her chest. With a long inhalation of breath, she opened her eyes and looked up at them with an expression of what could only be described as contempt.
"I have waited for this moment,"
said a deep voice that could never have belonged to the old woman with whom they had entered the basement.
"I will tell your fortune, heir of Ryanthorn. Pain, torture, your kingdom in flames. A foe who is known to you, yet unknown. Visions unbidden will haunt you asleep and awake. I see a wizard whose magic is failing, a friend who will view you as an enemy, a frail old man who is more than he appears, and a girl who will try to kill you."
The possessed fortune-teller cocked her head toward Matthias next.
"The faithful companion,"
the voice sneered.
"Your magic can save others, but it will not save you. You will not be ready. Greater magic will blind you, and you will take refuge in the dark, for it casts no shadows. You will live underground like a worm."
The figure that had been Madame Magdalonia turned to face Belvin, its expression now unreadable.
"For you there will be little pain in this life. You will be spared the fate that lies in wait for the others."
A terrible laugh then bellowed forth, followed by a scream. The madam convulsed. Lurching forward, her head slammed down onto the table. A small rivulet of blood trickled from beneath. The three young men stood transfixed, waiting to see what horror would come next. When nothing happened, Belvin slowly approached the still form. Reaching forth his sword, he tapped her shoulder gently with the flat of the blade. There was no response. He sheathed his sword, then took her wrist to feel for a pulse. As he did, her hand came alive, gripping his arm in a surprisingly strong hold. Madame Magdalonia looked up, eyes haunted and blood streaming from a gash in her forehead.
"Is it gone?"
"It is," Matthias assured her in a comforting tone. Moving to her side, he embraced her shoulders in an awkward hug. She latched onto his waist, shaking and sobbing. Eventually she released him and managed to get hold of herself. Employing the discarded cloth from the crystal shard to stem her still-bleeding cut, she stood shakily and led them back upstairs. No one spoke of what had transpired.
"Pick your masks," she told them upon reaching the top of the stairs. "Pick them and go."
No longer particular, they each chose a suitable mask from the glass case and moved quickly to the door. She refused to accept payment, and they did not argue. As soon as the boys were through the door, Madame Magdalena turned the sign in the window back to closed and searched for her traveling cases. Upon finding them, she swiftly shoved some of her most practical outfits and possessions inside. Mr. Stubbybucket rubbed against her leg, meowing nervously. The cat could sense from her behavior that something out of the ordinary was happening.
"It's time to leave," she informed him. "And this time, we are not coming back."